Friday. Is this everybody's last class before the weekend?
Yes, sir.
I can take off my mask up
Yeah.
here, right?
Yes, you
Okay,
can.
well, I was just making sure. Such a different world that we live in nowadays. But good to see y'all as well. As Dr. Briggs said, my name is Brian Hand. Right now, I'm Assistant Commissioner at Conference Carolinas. This is my second year there. I am oversee our media relations, external relations, sponsorships, all of that kind of stuff, marketing, all of that kind of stuff. If you follow us on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, that's me. It's been a real thrill to be able to be back involved in North Greenville in some tangential way. I mean, it's a little different. I haven't been back. This is my first time in the building since I graduated, unfortunately, in 2003. I say unfortunately because I just turned 40 last week. It just seems kind of surreal to be back here at 40. I never imagined. As I was talking to Dr. Briggs, I was looking at those Old Testament books and realizing that when I was 18, I was maps. I was having Old Testament in this classroom looking at those maps. So obviously not much has changed in some ways, and many things have really changed. It's a different North Greenville than I attended. But as Dr. Briggs, I'll kind of give you some of my background, and then I'll get into what you're all here for today. I'm going to try to make it as interactive as possible, show you some things that really go on from a conference office side of things to not make it as boring, because like I said, I know it's a Friday right before the weekend. So once again, I may be 40, but I remember what that was like at 18, 19, and 20. So I remember. So as he said, I went to school here. I played soccer here way back in the day. Once I finished up, I actually interned with it's not a team anymore. Now it's the Greenville Triumph, obviously. But I interned with the soccer team, the professional soccer team in the town, and actually played with them too. But the internship is what I got a lot more out of than playing soccer professionally at the time. But the internship led to me kind of realizing that I wanted to get into the media relations side of things while I was here, and after I finished my career playing soccer, I worked at the Greenville News on the sports desk. I would take on different things and go do football on Friday nights. Write stories and also work on the copy desk and take the calls when they did that. So when I worked for the Lions, I realized that media relations was kind of the way to go, and that I liked being staying around college athletics instead of writing it. Because when you're a media person, you know what's going on, but you don't know what's going on. When you're working on this side of things, you're really intricately involved, particularly if you're on a campus, because you get to interact with the student athletes, which is the fun part, right? I know y'all are the student athletes or students, but for us, that's the fun part. So, and then from there, I was lucky enough to get an internship, thanks to a lot of people here, get an internship working in AAA baseball in Nashville. So as you'll see that I took a lot of jobs to get to the real jobs. But I worked in AAA baseball at the Nashville Sounds, finished up my master's degree in sports management in Middle Tennessee at the same time, and was lucky enough, and I say what I said, that I took those jobs to get to the next spot, because it seemed like a long time at the time, but at 24 I became the youngest sports information media director, whatever you want to call it, in Division I college athletics at Presbyterian College. So, it was a lot of work to get there, and seemingly to me it seemed a lot of work to get there for sure. Just because, but you're setting up for the next 20 to 40 years of your life and not the next 2 or 3 years of your life. So I was lucky enough to get the job at Presbyterian College. I worked there for a few years. Was fantastic. I was there when we made the transition from D2 to D1, which was great. There weren't a lot of wins involved. But I've been to 48 out of the 50 states for that reason. I mean, for being there alone, because we had to travel a lot at that time to play different teams. So it was really cool getting to travel around the country and watch teams play basketball. And there were things when I was at Presbyterian, there were things like weekends that we would play NC State and Georgia Tech in the same weekend in basketball. I mean, that seems crazy, right? But it raised $600,000 for Presbyterian College, so you go do what you got to do, right? But as Dr. Briggs mentioned, I was lucky enough through my efforts there and through the efforts of many to help me get there to get an assistant AD position at USC Aiken from there, where, as he mentioned, to help with the building of the new facility, and then also to kind of oversee the day-to-day and work with the day-to-day of the basketball program. Which at the time was one of the best basketball programs in NCAA Division II. When I was there, I played in 3 straight Elite Eights, which in D2 basketball is the standard, just like Final Four is in Division I, Elite Eight is what they branded as in D2, and that's what we want all of our basketball programs in Conference Carolinas to do as well. You gotta get there, but that's the goal, right? I worked at USC Aiken for almost 6 years. Before, as he mentioned, I was lucky enough to get a call from the University of South Carolina to work for the university, and also to be the editor. I didn't just write for him, I was the editor of the Spurs and Feathers, which was the Gamecock Club publication. So I got to interact day to day. I hosted a YouTube show with Steve Spurrier. I was the analyst for South Carolina men's soccer games. So I got to live a dream, right? There was a lot of things that, I say all that, and it's kind of even surreal to me at the time. Dr. Briggs knows I got the opportunity. I was in charge of the video room at the Masters for 6 straight years. Even Dr. Battingfield and Dr. Briggs came to see me one time when I was there. It was a really cool experience. But yeah, I've had some really cool opportunities. But as I'm saying, it's hard work, right? You got to get there first, and you got to put in everything to get there. So after, I missed the day-to-day of college athletics. So I got an opportunity to be assistant AD at UNC Asheville, just up the road, right? And I was there for 3.5 years over marketing, communications, and ticketing, and also working with our fundraising and sponsorships. I had a staff of 8 under me, which was really cool. It was great. I didn't plan to leave, but my wife took a job in this area, and she told me it was her turn. We took a job in this area, and literally the same week she took that job, Conference Carolinas moved our offices from High Point to Greenville, and I was lucky enough to connect with the right people and get the job opportunity. And she took a job a month and a half before I did, and we started the same day. So it was really cool that God blessed us, and lots of prayer and everything, that we got to be at the same place at the same time, and continue to progress the career. So, whether you know or not, getting a conference office job at any level is really hard to do. Just alone in Division II, there's only 23 conferences. There's only 23. You look at it like this. There's only 23 external relations people in all of Division II at a conference level. So, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the 23. So it's been a really cool experience, and I know I'm talking a lot about myself, but I'm saying that just to say I was here. I was sitting in this same point. Micah was teaching me, believe it or not. If you all know Micah was teaching me. Dr. Briggs was a couple years behind me getting here, and just around the time I was leaving, coming in. But Micah was teaching me. A lot of the people, Jan McDonald was my AD as well. So like I said, a lot of things have changed. A lot of things are the same. So it's really kind of unique to see. So today though, I want to focus on. Dr. Briggs asked me to be here to kind of talk about, because this is a coaching class, right? How many people want to get into coaching, or are you just taking this class? Who actually wants to get into coaching? All right. So the rest of you it's a sports management class, right? But and I get it. You guys, it's good to get cross-trained and everything, right? But getting into coaching is hard. I'm sure Dr. Briggs and everybody that you've talked to has hit on it. There's only so many positions that are out there. It doesn't mean you don't put in the hard work to do it, but it's really hard. It's really hard to get coaching. I've also, and he mentioned it because I've glossed over it, but I was an assistant coach in soccer here. I was an assistant coach at another institution as well, at Limestone, in soccer, because I thought that may be where I go as well when I was working at the newspaper. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I found out over the last 15 years, I guess, it's hard to say that, but over the last 15 years that there's a ton of different ways to get yourself intricately involved. And if you're a coach, one of the most important things you can do is get to know your administrators. You obviously got to network and know the coaches, but you have to know your administrator, because guess what? Why do you need to know your administrators?
Connections, relationships.
Yeah, but what is that? What's the most important part of that? The most important part is the relationship, but what does that lead to?
Job security.
Job security. You got to know the people to get the jobs, right? If you don't know, like I mentioned earlier when I got the job at Conference Carolinas, when we decided to move to the upstate again, if I didn't know our commissioner already, you know, because we worked together when I was a kid meaning 24. But when we were working together, I knew him. I could make a call. I still had to get the job, but you know, but it gave me an in that he'd seen my work ethic from a young age, and so he saw it progress. I go in there and I won the job, right? So I say that to mean that everything that you do is just like that. So when you're trying to get into coaching, I mean, like say here, if you want to be, and how I say things stay the same. The women's soccer coach here, does anybody play women's soccer here? Nope, okay. The women's soccer coach here was my coach here, believe it or not. So Andy, this is his second stint here, but Andy Robinson was my coach as well when I was here. If you want to be a women's soccer coach, you need to start working with Andy Robinson. If you want, if you want to work with any of the sports, you got to make sure you get out there. Even to this day, I mean, that was something that I mentioned all the things I kind of did from 21 to 24. It was because from 18 to 21, I just played soccer and went to school here and had fun. I didn't know exactly what that was supposed to do, so I had to kind of make up for it. But like the earlier you learn some of these things, the better. And I know it sounds like I'm preaching, but I'm not. I'm just telling you that, you know, these are if you're calling me to get a job or you're trying to get a meeting, because I get a call all the time, and you probably heard me say this last year if you were there with the sports management meeting. We get calls all the time from people that say, I love sports. You know what my response is? Me too. I love sports. It's great. I love watching sports. It's what I do. What can you do? How can you separate yourself from the pack? If you're coaching, how can you, what practice plan can you put together? How can you see the game differently? What did you get out of that videotape when you're going dissecting the opponent after the game? What did you learn? How can you help your team get better? Because that little difference is what makes the biggest difference. So, I mean, I say all that because it's important to realize those things early. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to try to make this a little interactive just because I don't want to bore you too much. So we're actually going to go, I'm actually going to pass out. I guess I need to put on my mask for the pass out.
We can just hand them around.
Okay, that's cool.
Job, Corey.
So I printed out 25. I didn't know how many were in here, but that should be enough. But this, here, give me one too. It's passing out. This is we just had obviously almost every week we have meetings throughout the conference with our different committees. Every sport has their own committee. So obviously, Landon Powell would be in this meeting. For those that play baseball, and obviously everybody probably knows who Chris Powell is. So Landon would be involved in our baseball committee meetings. I want to kind of show you and kind of dissect what I'm saying when it means to work through a conference office through all of this. So basically, obviously, call to order is not that important to y'all. But when we do these conference meetings, and I actually just got off of one right before I got up here for another sport, one of us will run it and go through what they need to be working on, because at the same time, every sport has their own intricacies, right? What works in women's lacrosse is obviously not going to be that. Even in men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse and men's lacrosse are such different sports that you have to tailor everything to those sports. Even men's and women's soccer, where they're the same sport, but there's totally big differences between the way you would referee them and the different things that were going on. So we get with all the coaches and go through all of that kind of stuff. Obviously, playing rules update, just to I'll go through what a normal agenda would be like. But the playing rules update would be, what's changed in baseball, obviously, let's say baseball. They're instituting a faster pitch clock, right? So you need to get off the mound quicker and get the ball back to the pitcher quicker. If the coaches don't have a good understanding of that, we're not doing a good job of that in our own league, right? So, as far as that would go. So that's where I'm saying that there's more than you know. And as a head coach, because obviously y'all don't want to just coach the ones that want to coach. You want to be a head coach one day, right? So, or at least that's the hope, right? So with head coaching responsibilities come lots of other responsibilities, like being on these calls and having to listen to me talk about these type of things. You know, you have to do it. And the assistant coach, at the same time, while the coach is doing this, is having to do all the other stuff because the coach has to take on all these other responsibilities. Like you always hear about Nick Saban and what he does and how he do, but I mean, do y'all think that Nick Saban coaches every day? You're smart. No, he does not. He coaches the coaches, right? Because his job is to make sure that everything in the program is the way that he wants it to be. Now, there are some coaches, like I mentioned, I was blessed enough to do a show with Steve Spurrier. Coach Spurrier actually coached the offense. He didn't want to do it if he wasn't intricately involved. So he didn't just coach the coaches. He let the defensive coaches do the job, but he made sure that every minute detail was taken care of on the offensive side. Because like with Spurrier, everybody thought that Spurrier was just, you know, what you saw. That was all. That is Spurrier, but that was his public persona. The public persona and what he was like behind the scenes getting his team ready to play, two totally different things. That guy took, I mean, every little thing. If he was supposed to get a check at 1 p.m. and his calendar said that, hey, I'm getting this check and it's not here at 1 p.m., he's calling that person and saying, hey, I didn't get my check at 1 p.m. That's how anal that he was about every little thing. And I say that because you always hear about coaches being anal, and I know all the ones that could. Does everybody, almost everybody here plays here in some sport, I'm guessing, right? Is that true? Yeah. All right. So you hear you probably get tired of it, but your coaches, what do they say? It's the little things. It's, we got to make sure we got to get this detail right. We got to do this. We got to do that. It's important to know because, those little things really do make the difference. Let's go back. I'm sure most people aren't South Carolina fans in here. Is anybody a South Carolina fan? All right, okay, we got one. Good. All right, so but South Carolina, Tennessee, the ball doesn't hit I was at the game. I was working for ESPN. If the ball doesn't hit the guy trying to pick up the punt, South Carolina probably wins that game. But the difference is now they're 0-2 because and the same thing can be said of last week against Florida. You don't take 7 minutes off the clock, then you might have a chance to score twice, or maybe you get the onside kick, but those little things weren't taken care of. The same could be said for Clemson if they face somebody. Clemson's really good, but I'm just being honest. The difference is what Dabo has to do is get them ready for those little things. So that's why you see him get so mad about every little thing, even when they're up 55-0, because he knows Alabama's coming. He knows that Ohio State may be coming down the line. So even when you're winning 55-0, you have to get ready for those games. So if you're beating Virginia, by 35, you have to treat it as if you're down by 10, just because they don't have those opportunities to play a top 10 team each week like Florida does in the SEC. So, I keep using those as coaching examples, but that's why. So, in the same thing we said, coaches are intricately involved in the scheduling because obviously they want to know. Like in Conference Carolinas this year, we're having 4-game baseball series because the NCAA put in minimums and maximums on how many conference games or how many maximum games you could play. Excuse me. So, in Conference Carolinas, we have one of the best baseball conferences in the country. That's undebatable. So why would we go and play other people that we can't really compete against when we can compete against each other? Now the records might not be as good because the teams are so competitive and so good against each other, but it puts you in a better position to win when you get to the NCAA regionals, right? So that was the decision on that. All right, sports regulation. Has anybody ever really taken the time to go to a conference website? It doesn't have to be Conference Carolinas. And go to the SEC, go to the ACC. But have you ever looked at the sports regulations? Oh, you did? Okay. Well, yeah, that's a perfect example. So, at a conference office, not as much mine as much as our associate commissioner, because that's his role. But I'm helping him with it. We're redesigning all of our policies. But his job is to make sure that everything is written to the minute point. Everything is touched down, because you can't have a situation, like say a team starts a game at 4, but they don't have lights. You have to make sure that everything was set up that that doesn't happen. So, hey, you don't have lights, we're playing at 12, right? So you gotta set those things up. And that's kind of what a conference office does with the head coaches in that regard, to make them understand that and give the coaches a voice to be able to vote on it as well. The coaches advisory, because in addition to talking to us, coaches are on NCAA committees. You know, like obviously, Coach Powell is very highly thought of, as he should be. Everybody knows what he's done here, everybody knows what he did in the pro ranks, everybody knows what he did at South Carolina. He puts himself in those positions, so his advice and his, you know, what he has to say will be thought of very highly in that regard. I mean, the same could be said for any of our sports. To be honest with you, I'm just using him as an example since we got a baseball committee right here. Same thing with technology during competition. I mean, have you ever thought about what happens if every pitch, everything, when we put it on the Conference Carolinas Digital Network or the NCAA Digital Network, obviously everything's available for the public, right? So do you think, what do you think? Do you think coaches want that available for the public? What do y'all think? No, okay. So, you know, so we come up with ways to figure out how it still can be public, but they can't see everything. So, like in baseball, for example, putting the camera behind home plate, but not necessarily behind them. I mean, not so you can see what pitch they're throwing, and so you can see, try to steal their signs, right? So, you know, there's just some different things that go into that. I know I'm boring y'all, but at the same time, I'm also trying to kind of give you an idea of what this is really like if you're working for a conference office, because this is, you just mentioned, I'm sure when you were going through ethics, it was not the most fun, right?
It's a blast.
Was it fun? I mean, is it a sports ethics class?
Mhm.
Who teaches it? Battenfield. Yeah, I'm sure that was a blast. And you can tell him I said that. But yeah, no, but it's important. And I mean, I say that because that's the kind of dry stuff you'll hear when you get into this world. If you get into coaching, it'll be called the dry stuff. The dry stuff is important because you have to have it if you want to progress, and you have to know it. Particularly, as I mentioned, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but when you're a coach, you obviously got to cut up game film, right? And you're not just watching it just to watch. You're trying to see what formation worked, I mean, you know, what pitch worked, how they were scouting you, all of these kind of things. So you have to make sure that that's right. It's the same thing with all of this kind of stuff. So, and as we get down there, sports information reminders, obviously that would be me just making sure they knew what all that kind of stuff was. We just mentioned video. Coaches exchange all of that stuff after the game. They use different programs like Huddle or Synergy to get that information quickly after the game. That's why you see them on the bus after the game or really quickly already looking at what's going on. And a lot of times they film it themselves too, right? In Conference Carolinas and everywhere they have conference brands, guidelines, like I'm wearing our brand right now. You know, you have to use the yellow, blah, 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 all that fun stuff. But the ball contract, what does it, I mean, because every sport has their own different things. Like in soccer, we play with Wilson. In basketball, we play with Wilson. In softball, we play with Rollins. I mean, you know, it's a lot of different things like that. These are all, does anybody have any I mean, I'll move on to the next thing, but does anybody have any questions about any of this, or is this just too much in the weeds for y'all? Go ahead, sorry.
Do you think the dress up's boring?
What'd you say?
So you talked about like the dress up, do you think it's boring, or do you like it?
No, I don't. I think I'm in the middle on it. I think that some of the stuff that's boring is also fun. But I always like to say to people about any job, they wouldn't call it a job if it was fun. A job's a job, right? So you get to do what you love for a living if you go into coaching or athletics administration like me, sport. But at the same time, it's still a job. So those types of things are things you have to do. You're shaking your head. You don't think so?
Oh, no, I was
Okay. Oh, yeah.
just disagreeing with things, yeah.
That's cool. I'm just messing with you. But yeah, no, I don't think there are. If you talk to anybody in the country, even if you brought Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner up here, he would tell you that some of the things that they do are boring. I mean, it is. I mean, Mark Emmert, the NCAA head of the NCAA, he would tell you that some things are boring, but you know what? It's the job, and that's what you have to do. But there are also people out there the work in compliance and some of the other stuff, that's all, like you were talking about that you didn't like ethics, right? There are people that love doing that kind of stuff. And if you love doing that kind of stuff, go work in compliance. Like our compliance director thinks me designing videos and doing all that stuff is boring. But I go look at some of his stuff and he's, you know, and I think that it's somewhat boring, but we both have to know, each have to know what each other is doing. So I don't think there is a perfect answer to that, but I think that it's just, you do have to have the knowledge that if you go into coaching, there's gonna be some really fun parts, like getting to interact with the student athlete, getting to devise a game plan, getting to really get in the minutia of how you win a game. And there's gonna be some really boring part, like getting on these calls, dealing with the conference office, dealing with the NCAA, being told no, not because you don't think it's right, but because it's NCAA's rules and not yours, keeping up with recruiting, staying within their minimum, staying within all their stuff, making sure that you abide by all of those so you don't have a recruiting violation. All of those things are somewhat boring, but they're the rules. So that, unfortunately, that's, I mean, it's how many people, who all is on the football team in here? All right, so it's the same thing when you're watching film after the game. It's, you know, obviously there's some things that are, you know, when you have the explosive play over 20 yards, it's really fun to watch. But then there's also the play that your coach makes you watch 10 times of, you know, somebody not doing the pancake block right? So, you know, there's always little things that that you got to look at. So, you know, I think it's important. Any other questions on this? I'll move on to kind of we've kind of talked about what a committee meeting would look like, but I'll move on to, I'm also do a lot of our championships, and I was in charge of our championship for basketball, and I'm kind of moving how a coach would work with one of those types of things. Any more questions on any of that? Friday afternoon?
How often do you do like these per sport? Like,
We do 3 a year per sport. So we do an off-season call. So what sport do you play?
or on track?
Okay. So if you're on track, so we just talked to Cam a couple weeks ago, and then we're gonna got a meeting with Cam next week because we need to have one more cross country meeting. You know, in general, it usually be we meet last week, and then we would meet again in January, right before the in track early December, right before the season started for indoor track, and then we would meet right before the championship. So those are the general times we meet. Like for different sports, it's different things. Because I use indoor track as an example. So we do all of that again with outdoor track,
Yeah.
and then we do all of that again with cross country. So some of those coaches have to deal with 3 of those meetings, or so 9 meetings. So you know, so they have to be on 9 of those meetings instead of that. So, but they love it. That's why they do it. You know, the unique part about you might have seen the interview that I did with your coach. Did you see the interview on Conference Carolinas that we did with your coach?
With Coach Cam?
Yeah. So, you know, he was talking about some of that kind of stuff, how the intricacies of that. And I'm glad you were the one person that watched it. But yeah, that kind of stuff, you know, that it's in the weeds, but it's important. So, all right. So I'm gonna pass this out. Much in the same. And if you notice, I say much in the same because they look alike, right? But that's important too, to keep the same look and feel when you're doing some of this kind of stuff. This one might, so I didn't have, or I shouldn't say I didn't have the ability, but I didn't want to pay to do 25 of these because it's 50 pages. So y'all can pass it along. And I mean, we have our own one, but I just meant I didn't want to pay for new toner. So as I'm going to pass around what the handbook looks like. If you want to look at it and just kind of gloss at it really quickly, because we have this one's just the basketball, but we have a handbook, a championships handbook for every sport and every championship that we will have. To what we were just talking a minute ago, we were working on the indoor track and field handbook earlier this morning.
How's that going?
What?
And how's that going?
We're trying to have it, but, yeah, I mean, that's not, once again, that's not our call. It goes to what you were talking about, and what I said. The NCAA makes things that we have to abide by as well, so, our hope is to have it, but, you know, we can't control the NCAA, so. But we are pushing on our end, along with other 23, members, conferences trying to have it, so. All right, so, kind of give you an idea of what, this is just for the semifinals. This past year, we moved the championship, as you probably all saw, to Jerry Richardson Indoor Stadium on the campus of Wofford. It was a really cool experience. Speaking from a media, I was a media director, and I was over the whole thing as the championships director. But just as a media guy, what we could do there and the way we could make it look and the different things we could do on the boards and everything. I mean, if you've never been to Wofford's basketball arena, I hope you'll join us in March for our championship next year. But I highly encourage you to go to a game there because it's first class. Yes, sir.
I worked at a few games in March. That was a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you did a great job. Yeah, we appreciate it. It really was a big experience, and our student athletes love it. We got to do a lot of things that we might not have been able to, not just because it was at Wofford, but because they built that facility, and Jerry Richardson gave them $50 million to build that facility. So, well, to give you an idea on that one, y'all may have heard this one before, but basically, Wofford never charged the Panthers rent for the whole time that they did their training camp there. For, what was that, 25 years, or 24 years, I think, that they did it there before they couldn't have it there this year. And to pay back for their generosity to their alum and the billionaire, Jerry Richardson gave them back the $50 million. He just wrote, literally, like it's funny if you talk to the Wofford people, literally wrote him a $50 million check. So I know we're all working towards that too, but and these are all things you can Google and look up and see the story, but it's really interesting to see. But that was why they did it. They never charged them rent, and so as you saw, you might have saw earlier this week, Panthers unveiled their new training facility. Look, if you haven't seen that, I'd definitely encourage you to Google that if you're interested in sports management. It's really cool what they're doing in Rock Hill, and it's going to be a boon for South Carolina and North Carolina. But because of that, the Panthers, and obviously Jerry Richardson doesn't own the Panthers anymore, but because of that, it won't be there anymore. So that was kind of like his going away present to him to say thank you for all of that. So the bells and whistles they have available there's a reason Wofford's very good, as small as they are at the Division I level. The reason they beat North Carolina 2 times in a row. They're able to recruit at a different level because of what they were able to provide by that facility. So it's really cool, even though they're the 3rd smallest D1 institution in the country. So it's now you know I taught y'all something, right? So if I didn't teach you anything else, I just taught you some Division I trivia. Presbyterian is the smallest. There's random knowledge for you.
Who's second smallest?
Who's second smallest? I don't remember. You know, the smallest actually used to be Centenary, but they're not a D1. They moved to D3. They were only 800 students.
Wow.
There's a lot of schools that actually moved from D1 to D3 because believe it or not, particularly your academic institutions. So let's just use Furman. So Furman's a really good academic institution. It would make no sense for them to be in D2. Just because they would win at the same level in D2 that they would win in D1 because it'd be the same kind of money that they're spending right now. But if they moved to D3, academically it would align, particularly like with an Emory or somebody like that. And Emory's got an unbelievable D3 program. They would fit 10 times more with them in Barry and Rome than they would with any school in Division II. So it's just, hey, can you tell I do this for a living? Those are the kind of intricacies at a conference level that we deal with and talk about, and that's why I can spout all these things off the top of my head. And the same reason that we added Francis Marion and UNC Pembroke to Conference Carolinas, because they fit more who we are, and they progress us in all areas. So I'm excited. I hope you saw that too, but I'm kind of excited that they'll be part of Conference Carolinas going next year. It's only going to make the league that much better. And hopefully you know, we don't have, now that gives us 5 football institutions. We're not necessarily, adding football anytime soon, but with 5 institutions that play it, it's a real possibility at some point maybe down the line.
Is Limestone out now?
Limestone is out. Limestone had, you heard, I started in July. Everybody at the conference office, including Jill Weston, who's the fiance of the offensive coordinator here, including Jill and Kit, our associate commissioner, we all started the same day in July. So we all came in with the commissioner. So they had already announced they were leaving before we even got here. So we had no say other than, all right, cool, great, we'll enjoy working with you for the last year. And I have nothing bad to say about Limestone. Well, yeah, you can. But I don't. I enjoyed working with them. So they some good people there. But they had already decided. And I mean, we got a former Crusader playing for them this year, and Jeremiah. Jeremiah was our intern. If you know Jeremiah Bogan, he was our intern. He was our intern last year. He did an unbelievable job for us. And I hated to see him leave here, particularly to go to Limestone. But I'm excited for him. He's got a bright future in whatever he does. All right, getting back to this, just to kind of give you like an agenda. So she was asking like how many times that we have these meetings. This would be the example of what would be the 3rd meeting, the end of right before the championships meeting. So it would be all the kind of same things we did, but as you were looking at that handbook, which I know you didn't have the time to look through everything because it was 50 pages long, but it had every detail that they could think about. Same thing could go for an indoor handbook or or lacrosse or whatever. They all look like that. They all have that same detail to them. But I had basketball at the ready just because it was on my computer this morning. But if we were talking to the coaches, we would go over everything they need to know. Because think about it like this. Because not all of our championships, a lot of our championships, they may start at the host institution or the higher seeded school, and then it moves. So you don't know where you're going. So you have to get prepared if you're the assistant coach particularly, because none of the head coaches deal with the logistical travel and all that kind of stuff. I shouldn't say none. Some may get involved, but most of them delegate that to their assistant coaches. So those assistant coaches have to get all of that ready for them to be ready to go to Spartanburg on Thursday when you don't know whether you're going to Spartanburg on Tuesday or not because you got to win the game first. So they got all that. They have to get all that ready and then be ready to get on this call the next day. So whether they played at 8 o'clock and didn't get home till 3 a.m., they still got to be on this call the next day at 9 a.m. To get ready for the championship, to get ready, and then they got to get their kids ready to go to play in Spartanburg on the Thursday so they can be ready to play on a Friday. So there's a lot of work that goes into that kind of stuff. That would be what this would be about, really. We go through awards, tournament logistics, who's got what locker, as you can see in there, I got who's got what locker room, what time is your pregame shoot around, what time, what ball are we using, how much time's in between games, what logo is going up on your locker room, all that fun kind of stuff. It seems trivial, but in the world of coaching is incredibly important. So I don't have to go through all that because you've seen it, you've seen the handbook. But Dr. Briggs, what time did you say this was at? It was 5?
Few more minutes.
Okay. So does anybody have any, before I say thank you and everything, does anybody have any questions over any of that or how that would work with the championship? Or why so much goes into it? Y'all are way too easy. So
Brian, what happens if you get coaches that are less cooperative or less cordial? How do you deal with that?
So, it depends on the situation, right? But if it's a coach that continuously doesn't do what they're supposed to do, obviously the commissioner, we have, going back to the ethics and policies, we have policies in place that outline that and say like, hey, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, then there are repercussions. So, if a coach doesn't abide by, what are NCAA mandates first, and then Conference Carolina mandates, then we'll have to step in. And, luckily, around our body, mind, and soul narrative, which if you're in one of our sports, I hope you know what that means. We try to value the religious aspects of being in Conference Carolinas, And I say that to say that we are very lucky in that we don't have too many problems in that kind of regard, because most of our coaches are ethical. Most of our coaches do the right things. Now, does that mean we don't have those problems? No, we have those problems, but we just work through them within the framework of what is given. But that's why you have those policies and ethics and everything set out for them, because if you don't have that, then you're just trying to talk through things and everybody's gonna think that you're just making a decision that has no basis. But because we have policies in place, there are structures and things that we can do to make sure that that's right. Yes, ma'am.
So we were talking in another class about how one of the schools in North Carolina has recently had a work study scandal.
Yeah.
Do you deal with that at all, or is that like just with the school who deal with
Yeah,
it?
the unique part about that one was that, once again, it was well before we were there. The repercussions came while we were here, obviously, but yeah, for the last, like I sent out the statement and did all that other stuff, but, and I've known about it since the day I started, because it was like one of the first things I learned about, because we've been working through it since then. So it was almost a full year before that came out, publicly, before the NCAA made their decision. So, our role was to make sure that King and Southern Wesleyan were doing the right steps on their end, work with NCAA to make sure that they did all the right things and that they were taken care of. Make sure the biggest thing, make sure it never happened again, because the people that it happened to had been long gone from King. We're talking, some of this was like 10 years ago, like you probably talked about in class. But some of those people hadn't been there in forever. Now, the coach did lose his job. He didn't lose his job, but he resigned before any of this even came into place. So, and he got a show cause, which he couldn't coach in college this year anyways. But and Pitts didn't necessarily know everything was going on. I'm talking about the head coach didn't necessarily know everything was going on either. He found out and had to take care of it. But as the head coach, just like Bruce Pearl at Tennessee, or anybody else that you can think of along that lines, you're the head coach. You're gonna have to deal with it. Jim Boeheim had to sit out a long time for stuff that he had no idea about, but he was the head coach. So now we can get into a larger discussion about why doesn't he know about these things? But there's now when they can prove that you do know about it, like Rick Pitino at Louisville, then you're gonna get the hammer, and that's why Louisville got it very quickly. But it's the same thing with North Carolina. Everybody always asks, like, how come North Carolina doesn't get in trouble for kids not going to class? Or why they did for like 20 years? Nobody could prove it. Everybody, that you had whistleblowers, you had people saying that this happened, but they never had anybody, they could never prove behind the scenes that the grades were actually done by somebody else. Because you would literally have had to have a camera on somebody taking the test for somebody else. That's hard to do. It doesn't mean it couldn't have happened, but nobody, the NCAA or North Carolina, nobody could ever produce that. So that's why North Carolina didn't get in trouble with that. So all of that to say that there's so many different things that are going on. It's the same reason Will Wade still has a job at LSU in men's basketball, just because they can't prove all of this stuff. Now, they have smoking guns, they have other things, but the NCAA hasn't proven those are real yet. So it may prove it, he may lose his job. But there's many things that go into that, and those are all perfect examples of what a conference office does and what you're trying to negate. But at the same time, it's almost like a parent, and that, like I can tell my kids what to do. It doesn't mean they're gonna go do it. I can kind of steer them the right way, but, like I have a 12 and a 6-year-old. I was coaching my son's practice last night, and, my son was the one messing around. And he's 12 years old, and after the practice, I'm saying, you're my kid. I'm coaching your practice to help you out, and you're making me look bad. And there's not anything he really necessarily did wrong, but it's just trying to explain how all of that works. So it kind of goes back to perception of reality, right? So if you think that King and SWU are bad for what they did, which neither of them really did anything necessarily bad, except they just didn't intricately know everything going on, then that's your opinion. But at the same time, it's just on our end, just trying to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen going forward. Any other questions?
What about internships at the office?
Yeah, for sure. I mentioned Jeremiah. Jeremiah was my 14th North Greenville intern. I actually went back and while he was there, because he asked me, so I went back and actually went through it. He was my 14th North Greenville intern over the years. I'm still friends with a lot of them. I mean, some of them, like, that Dr. Briggs would know, like Tommy Chambers and people like that, they weren't even that much younger than me when they started doing it, so they've actually become friends over the years. But they, we were always looking for internships in Conference Carolinas, interns that are interested in learning. We mentioned what Jeremiah has done. He's had a lot of he decided to go back and play his final year, but he had job opportunities too, because of what, he had done with us and the good job that he had done. I mentioned the basketball championship. He kind of helped me very much with that. Since I was the head of it, he would do a lot of the work that I couldn't necessarily focus on at the time. So he did a great job. But if anybody's ever interested, let us know. If you know Jill, let Jill know. If you let me know. Dr. Briggs, I have business cards over there if you want them. But let us know, and we can definitely connect you, because we're always looking, and not just us. Dr. Briggs has heard me say this many times, and everybody always says this, I'm sure. But that's always my hope for you, is get out there and get, it doesn't have to be an intern. Go do things so you can get a job. Go work on campus. Go try to work for the Greenville Triumph. Go try to work for the Swamp Rabbit. Go try whatever you're trying to do. Or if you want to be a coach, since we're in a coaching class, go learn. Go try to meet different coaches, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people, and right now, it's about to even get worse, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. You got to get yourself out there if you want a job. So do everything you can to separate yourself from the pack. I hope I haven't bored you too much and given you some information. This is, like I said, these are all things that is exactly what Dr. Briggs wanted me to focus on, what it was like for a coach to deal with the conference office. And I thought about it, and I thought maybe more of a high level would, give you an idea of what it's like a little more. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If anything, it was something different. I know it's a Friday afternoon, but it was something different. So I hope you all enjoyed it.
Great, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. See y'all Monday. Have a blessed day.
Yeah.